right, welcome everyone to the Knights of Ren live stream. We are going to be having a lot of fun today. With us are great and wonderful and awesome friends of the show and Patreons. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. We've got Chris, Larcher, and Pearl Yeti. So thank you guys so much for joining us. How are y'all doing today?
Doing great.
Doing awesome, it's Chris Bates.
Yeah, just really excited to talk more Spirit of Rebellion.
Yeah, so why don't you guys tell us, before we get started, just a little bit about your events, your experience, what you think about new Spirit of Rebellion cards, and we'll start with Chris, and then we'll go to Andrew, and then we'll wrap up with Pearl.
I'm really excited for the new cards to come out. I'm in the Minnesota meta area, so we play a lot of Destiny. We had a great number of pre-release events. I got to go to 3. I think there was like a total of 7, maybe in the immediate area. So we got bombarded with them. Got to see a lot of the cards, got to play with them, and just really excited for the new cards to come out.
Yeah, I'm in the Orlando area, much the same with Sugi, and I was able to go to 3 events, although I got packs from 2 of them, but I'm just really excited about this new set and what it has to offer. Really blows this whole game wide open.
Yeah, this is Pearl Yeti. Portland area had a staggering 5 events, so I was lucky enough to get to all of them, and just really excited to see so many new cards out. But more importantly, the events brought people out of the woodwork that we hadn't seen for a long time. So product gets people into this game, and it's just great to see more product out there, even if it was just a small amount.
Yeah, it's really exciting. So today, for those of you who are joining us, we are going to be going over quite a few cards, and we're just going to talk about what we think, what we want to see, like the combinations, and how we're going to get these cards to the table. So our first character, and I'm really excited to talk about her, this is Mon Mothma. So she is the skilled politician. She comes at 9 HP, 11 points, and 14 points for her elite. And she's got 1 focus, 2 focus, 1 shield, 1 resource, a blank side, and her effect is after you play an event, you may reroll a die of the same color as that event. Let's just go for it. Like, what do you guys think about this card?
This is Chris. I don't play a lot of heroes, but I do think she has a good die. I think her point cost is good. I mean, she'll be able to be paired with, have a lot of decent combos. I kind of look at her as a little bit of a better die than Akbar, maybe, with a trade off of the ability. Maybe you want her ability more. So I think I'm excited to see her actually hit the table. No damage size is interesting, but I think you could still play her at 14 points and pair her with somebody that does do damage, does do some work.
Yeah, this is...
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, man.
Sorry, this is Larcher. Yeah, I like her. I think she's gonna slot in with that the It's a Trap all-in deck with Leia. She fits the same curve as Akbar, and she gives you more focus than Akbar does. So you're gonna get the die sides you want more. I think she's gonna be viable in that deck. I don't know about other decks. I think single die she could be good, as long as focus isn't directed towards her.
Yeah, so this is Pearl Yeti. I really like her in the Leia It's a Trap deck. I've been playing a lot of Jabba Dooku lately, and when I saw her, I was like, oh, she's kind of like Jabba. Like, I can, use that to reroll my own dice, or I can, offensively reroll my opponent's dice if we have a color matchup. And at the event last night, we saw a lot of mill decks, which is really, really exciting. And people were defending against mill by actually using Leia's ability to reroll dice instead of discarding, and using Mon Mothma to reroll dice, kind of getting a little bit of free reroll action, so they weren't milling themselves. So I think she's going to be really fun to get out there, especially against those mill decks.
Right, and now we've seen another character that, for heroes, we've got, I believe, 3. No, we've got 4 I can think of off bat that have 2 resource sides, and so she's going to fit really well in with Akbar or any deck that needs to produce a lot of money in order to get big cards out onto the field. But it's interesting because the trade for her character is you have either a lot of money or a lot of consistency. Where do you think she slots into, say, the damage aspect? Because obviously the game is still heavy in aggro, and I don't think that's going to change too terribly much. We're going to see a shift but there's still obviously decks that want to deal damage to win the game. Who does she work with in order to capitalize on damage dealing, since she's going to be a healthy amount of your deck, and she's not producing anything in terms of damage?
Yeah, Spirit of Rebellion gave you some cool cards to put on her. Wingman is great because it's, you can overwrite it later on for something that does a little bit more damage, and it speeds up Leia and Mon Mothma early on. And then I want to say Overkill, but modified sides. So that card is still a little bit iffy for that deck.
I think she could also be. She could be even being paired with Chewbacca. She would fit perfect in the cost for Chewbacca. Be 30 points on the nose for them, and she could definitely support Chewbacca and he hits heavy. So you're going to be able to get the dice sides you want with Chewie combined with Mon.
I definitely try a deck with her and Han. I don't know if it'd be good or not, but 1 dice her, 2 die Han, and try to get into that focus, get some money, get some shields. I think it'd be an interesting pairing. Get Han access to red cards. So I don't know if it'd be good or not. It'll only be 3 die, but it's definitely worth a try.
Yeah, Lastifras says in the chat the 2 focus sides on an elite character feels so good. I genuinely think she'd be disgusting if that shield side was range damage or a discard instead. Being able to change focus with her is so easy to do. And that's a really interesting question to discuss, because we've seen a lot of cards like Fast Hands or Speed. The game has progressed in the action economy or speed up of the game. Do you think her chain focus is going to be a heavy... are we going to see that happening in the meta, where you're just going to be use Mothma to focus, and then resolve just a ton of damage super fast?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're going to see a lot of that. But also, if not played correctly, then you're just setting up your opponent to wipe away your quality dice at the same token as well, though.
Okay. So we'll move along. I have a couple cards we're going to be talking about later that I think are going to come back to Mon. C-3PO in particular, just because he turns everything into whatever you need it to be. And it's really interesting because now when you look at a character, you look at Mon, it's like, oh, she has no damage. Well, now there's cards that could turn her into whatever you want. Obviously, the 2 focus is really the number you want to readjust, because you don't necessarily need to burn C-3PO out for a 1, but we'll talk about that later. So the next card that's coming up is the Rebel Commando, and this is essentially the counter character, you could say, to Death Trooper. So it's 10 points for 1 die, 10 health. The card has 1 range damage, 2 range damage, 1 discard, 1 resource, a special that costs 1 resource to resolve in a blank, and the special effect, if resolved, is remove an opponent's die. What do you think? I mean, first of all, I do want to pose this question. Do you think Triple Rebel Commando is going to be a thing?
I don't think so, myself. 10 health is nice. You're only hitting damage on 30% of the sides, unlike, for instance, where we're going to compare this to a Death Trooper, where you're hitting 60% on those sides. You do get some resources. You get some mill, especially with Commando Raid now. It's more of a thing now. We got more red characters with mill on them.
I think we could see the 3 Rebel Commandos. Same as the Death Troopers, just having the wingman accessible to get so many red characters out at once, and same thing with squad tactics. I think it could be pretty mean, at very least kind of interesting to play with.
It's definitely more versatile than Death Troopers. It's easier to see 3 Death Troopers than it is Rebel Commandos, but it's definitely worth a test at least. When you want that damage rolling out, 3 discard sides, though, it's going to be painful. So it's I think we're mostly going to see them paired with other characters, probably in a 3-character deck, to round out and give some discards, some money. And the ability is pretty good. You got to pay for it, but removing a dice is good control.
Yeah, we see a lot of new 2-cost red upgrades as well that can go on these guys. So training,
right.
gets them another die. Their die isn't that bad either. I kind of like training on them. And overkill is a good fit on them as well.
Yeah, one thing that the Rebel Commando does too is that it's got that special where you move an opponent's die. Hero Red really doesn't have a whole lot of removal, so that's one thing that it also brings to the plate as well.
Yeah, so getting away from the triple Rebel Commando deck, I just want to talk about the card by itself, and it's a very interesting card because you've got a lot of things that you can use with it. So you've got access to Cunning, where you could copy the effect and not have to pay the resource. You've got a lot of really great cards like you were talking about Wingman. When you activate a red character, you can activate the character that Wingman is attached to. So you get kind of this built-in hit and run. You've got Training, which when you equip that to a non-unique character, it brings them to unique level, so you could get 2 Rebel Commando dice. You've got access to, like you guys have said, Commando Raid, which helps you discard. You get to draw a card, and you get to discard 3 instead of 1. You've got all kinds of guns and things. It's an interesting card, but is it going to deal enough damage, or is it focused enough to be relevant in the next set?
I think that's a little too early for me to speculate on. I haven't seen it played enough. I feel like 2 Rebel Commandos were open in Portland, and we grabbed one of them. But we did wind up putting him or her. That's up for debate with a with an interesting matchup once we're ready to talk about who to partner them with.
I think it's going to see play. It's got a lot of different things on it that could be useful to certain decks. I could even see this being in a mill deck very easily. It's got that mill side. We'll talk later, bring C-3PO. C-3PO turns any die side to a mill. So it could see play.
All right, so you've already branched into that idea, Pearl. Where do you think this card fits in? Like, we talked about Mon, she's going to fit in with X and Y. Where does Rebel Commando fit in the scope of, hero decks?
So if we can keep it at, Spirit of Rebellion really isn't out yet. Everyone just has a handful of cards, and we're trying to have fun with it. We opened up Obi-Wan and Rebel Commando and noticed that you can put them together. So you Obi-Wan Rebel Commando with it's a trap with some splash of blue. It was a ton of fun to play, and competitively we matched it against a pretty meta Poe-Ray deck, and it held its own pretty well. I won't say it won, but they were both really close matches that we played with it. And then the next day, playing against the other Spirit of Rebellion decks, it did really well. I think it won all of its matches. And most importantly, it was just a lot of fun to play that combo together.
So, like, how did that work? Can you elaborate on what the deck did and what makes it fun? Because there's, everyone's definition of fun is pretty unique.
I feel like it actually lived up to it's a trap because it really was a trap. Nobody was expecting the deck to be completely loaded with red upgrades and for it's a trap to be coming out and, doing all the damage. And then the other fun one was just cargo hold was the battlefield we chose. So we were moving ones with the force around and putting force ghosts on Rebel Commando, and Obi-Wan just has a lot of control with that Guardian. And I kind of wanted to talk about it when we got to Asajj, but Force Illusion really keeps people on the board really long, and it was keeping Obi-Wan on the board for quite a ways, long enough for Rebel Commando to really get loaded up and start doing some real damage.
Killer. That sounds like so much fun.
And I guess
Asajj is next on the list, so I'm excited to talk.
I guess I'll wrap it up. Obi-Wan is kind of like Akbar. I mean, he's a focus standby buddy, and those all-in plays, especially when he has his Force Ghost out there that you can get to a 3 damage side. It can have really big damage potential.
Interesting. What do you guys think makes the Commando weak? Now, like we've talked about the positives, but like when I look at this card, it's really spread out. So I feel like you kind of have to build the deck around the Commando to make it efficient in order to capitalize on what it's supposed to do, because when you see a lot of symbols, that's not always a good thing, especially at low values, because most everything here is a 1. You've got 2 damage, but this card by itself isn't doing much alone. So what do you need to do to help, pick up the pace?
You know what we did was cheap upgrades. Those DH-17s. Really important to get out there early. Like you said, the Rebel Commando is not doing much without extra dice on it, and that's the big weakness.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely is going to need some upgrades on him to make him good. Also, pair him again, like we said, pair him with a character that has focus, so you can get the die sides you need.
So we decided it's a him. I'm still out on it.
It's really hard
It's
to tell with all
ambiguous,
that camo. So let's move along to one of my favorite cards in the set that I cannot wait to get on the table. This is Asajj Ventress, the Force Assassin. She is 15 points for her elite and non-elite sides. She has 9 health, which we'll talk about in a second. Her die sides are 1 melee, 2 melee, 1 focus, 1 disrupt, 1 resource, 1 blank, and her special effect is after an opponent discards a card from their hand to reroll dice, you may force them to choose and discard another card from their hand. Let's talk about this. What do you guys think?
So strong. She's so strong, so sexy, so sexy. I like villain. I get excited about her. I like discard a lot, mill a lot. She's not a typical mill character, obviously, because she doesn't have any discard size on her die. But obviously, that ability is super useful in getting cards out of somebody's hand. Because people are going to be rerolling right now. At least in the Awakenings world, you pitch cards all the time to reroll. And so with her on the board, you definitely have to think about that if you want to. Is it worth getting rid of 2 cards to reroll your die? So I think about, obviously the comparison is with her with Dooku. So that's going to be a very strong matchup since they both hit melee, and they both have Dooku has discard the 1 cost 2 discard side. You could do 4. You could do total 4 dice, both 2 dice for each of them. I am interested in actually pairing her with Jabba. I think her with Jabba will be decent if you're going for a mill with a damaged alternative win route. Just because they're going to either have to go after Jabba first or her first, and either way, they're going to get cards out of their hand by rerolling, or you're going to be getting cards out of their hand by focusing Jabba's dice into discard sides. So I'm excited for Asajj. I think she'll be a major player in this set.
Yeah, I agree. She's really threatening. And that ability, it's something that your opponent's always going to have to think about as long as she's out there. It's going to make them make mistakes just because they're constantly going to think about that. Because if playing against an aggro, you're going to want to pitch your dice to re-roll. But with Asajj still on the board, they're going to have to think really long and hard before they do it. Because they know they're going to lose 2 cards out of their hand. And that's probably going to be the last 2 cards they have left in their hand more times than not. So they're going to give up any of their control that they have in their hand to try to get that extra 1 or 2 damage.
Yeah, I try to really evaluate her ability in relation to Vader. I think most longish games, I think even go to about 6 rounds. So with Vader, that's 6 cards out of your hand. With Ventress, if you can remember to tell them to discard that extra card, they only have to do 3 rerolls to equal Vader. And think about your games. People discard way more than 3 times to fix their dice. So I think she's going to be getting tons more cards out than Vader will. And you can have 2 of her dice out and 2 dice of a lot of strong matchups to go with her.
I do want to point out too that I think FFG did a great job in being able to pair her with Dooku. If you're a lore nerd, obviously that she had a connection to Dooku in the Clone Wars and all that junk. Hopefully, in the future, if they come out with a Quinlan Voss, hopefully she could pair with him as well. So
Lassifras says in the chat, when she's paired with someone like Jabba, who's a huge threat on his own, it's really hard to find a target that feels good. And that's one of the things that I want to talk about Asajj for, as long as we want. But when the first time I saw Asajj, I was like, oh my gosh, she's a combo piece with so many fluid decks. So the first thing I thought was her and Unkar. Unkar eats cards out of your hand and makes money. She forces your opponent to discard more cards when they want to re-roll their dice. I also thought obviously about Jabba because he just eats and eats and eats. Like he's so
Yes.
great. The other thing I thought about was like maybe running Asajj. Like you could do a rainbow deck with like one Asajj, one Unkar, and then perhaps maybe like a Stormtrooper or something at 7. I have to do the math, but you having the rainbow, if you can get her in red, she has that disrupt side with Imperial Inspection is a card that people just cringe at when it hits the field. And the fact that she can trigger into that is important. And I think that's really, really nasty is if you can get her with red and be able to, bounce cards back to an opponent's hand. Sure, they have more cards in their hand, but the point is they're spending resources to play a card. You bounce it back with Imperial Inspection, and then if they want to reroll, they're looking at this card that they want to play, and they're like, do I pitch an additional card for the reroll I need to continue playing the game? Like, do I you have to force people to make really terrible decisions. And I did think about the same thing Pearl did about, who's faster? Is it Vader or is it Asajj? And I think her health makes up that difference, because if she was any bigger, it would almost be unfair because Vader would instantly become almost unusable because she can eat your cards faster, and Vader, he just doesn't get nearly as many cards out. But of course, he deals more damage. He's bigger in health. There is a fair trade. So I find it interesting how she's been designed. But who do you pair her with just to hurt people? What do you guys think about that?
I really like her with Dooku, and I like that she's, continue to keep cards like Immobilize, which, there's a lot of hate for Immobilize because it doesn't get you anywhere. Well, she actually gets you places with Immobilize because she's kind of forcing those rerolls to happen.
I think if you want to go the choke, also pair her with a 1-die Krennic. She fits in with Krennic. You get that extra disrupt. You get a 2 discard with Krennic. You're gonna have a mismatched damage where she's melee and Krennic and the Death Trooper is to our range damage. But you can just kind of slowly maybe pluck away at their third character, some 7 or 8 cost of character, while you just choke their resources and cards in hand.
And you would get Imperial Inspection as well in that situation, so that'd be good. You can also you can do a rainbow deck. I'm not sure it'd be good, but you could do 1-die her, 1-die Jabba, and a Trooper. And that way you get Imperial Inspection, and you can try to do some kind of hybrid mill damage type deck with those 3, and that's just gonna give the opponent a tough choice of who they go after first. But then you only have 3 dice though.
Yeah, and another card I definitely want to discuss pairing with Asajj is Force Push. And if you haven't seen this card, you're going to see this card in play. I'm going to talk about it right now. So it is a 3 cost. It's a rare. It's neutral blue. So heroes and villains can play it. But with Asajj, it's going to be super evil. So it's got 2 range damage, 2 range damage, 2 discard, special, blank. It's an upgrade ability, so you can holocron it in. It's a blue character only, and the special says turn up to 2 of an opponent's dice to sides of your choice. Obviously, you flip them to a blank, and if they reroll, you have gotten 2 cards out of their hand. If they don't reroll, you can set up a huge Feel Your Anger play. Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like this is just going to be a really interesting deck because it's not going to be nearly as focused on crushing the opponent with damage, but you're going to be mixing and matching not only damage but resource removal. So you're going to be getting rid of their dice. You're going to be turning their dice to blank so they have to reroll, or they're just going to have dead turns. And I think it's super interesting that even though she has damage on her, she's kind of not really focusing on that aspect of her die faces.
Correct. Yeah, I think the ability to turn dice sides to blanks are going to get a lot stronger in this set. There's also other events and stuff that will combo off of blanks more than the last set, like Feel Your Anger. There are some other ones, I can't remember the names of them, that combo off of blank sides. Also, Force Push is a hard counter to TIE Pilot.
So there's my favorite new blank side card is Anger. and that's you count 2 of your own blanks, and you get
Okay.
to resolve one of your opponent's dice, showing damage as if it was your own dice, which is, I think, my second favorite card in Spirit of Rebellion. It's basically a free. I'm blanking on the yellow villain card, or the yellow neutral card. Reversal. It's basically a free reversal. And I had somebody force push 2 of my dice to blanks, and I angered their 3 damage lightsaber back at them in spite.
Yeah, and there's one other card I want to talk about. Like, Asajj is so interesting to me because she has a strong ability, and she's obviously going to be focusing on turning your dice to blanks to force you to play cards. But obviously, Fantasy Flight considered this because there's quite a bit of stuff in Spirit of Rebellion that resolves around you having blanks. In Awakenings, having blanks was like the worst thing. Like, you just lost that turn if you were blanked out. And in this version, we're going to see a lot of things that trigger based on if you have blanks. And the card I'm going to talk about is called Meditate. If you haven't seen this, it's a 0-cost support. It's a common, it's neutral blue, so, once again, everybody can play it. And the support says action. Exhaust this support and remove one of your dice showing a blank. Turn one of your dice to a side not showing damage. And man, that's something I'm really going to be running in my blue decks, because if someone flips my stuff to blank, because we're going to see more Mobilize. I'm very sure Mobilize is going to be very prevalent in the meta just because of how functionally strong it is. Like, regardless of what you roll, it's still an online action. And if you're running it with, all of these, hey, if you have blanks, do a thing, there's no reason not to blank your opponent's stuff out. And with Ventress, that's going to hurt really bad. But if you're sitting on a Meditate and you get hit by Asajj, now you can actually get some filtering out of a bad situation. So I think it's interesting. Like, is it going to be as bad as we think it is, or are you going to be able to capitalize off of, hey, you got a couple blanks, cool, play some anger, play some Meditate, use those blanks as a resource?
Yeah, we had a player already set one of those decks up. And has been playtesting it, and I think it's been going pretty well. And with Dooku, Ventress, and Meditate, and Force Push, and he's aptly named it Shooting Blanks. And it's a funny name, and it's an interesting deck list, and I think it is going to see some really good play. You can holocron out just so many good cards that you really don't care how they roll. They roll bad things are still going to come out of your hand to hurt your opponent. They roll good, you're just going to either do damage or do some really heavy mill.
Something I thought was very interesting was when we first talked to Lucas about the game, and he was talking about the way the game is designed. He wanted blanks to be this unknown event, like you're in the midst of battle and something happens you didn't predict, and so you do nothing. You're not dead, you're just unable to react to the situation the way you wanted it to. And now, like, when you played Awakenings, blanks were just like, it was a dead draw, it was a dead hand, dead card, whatever you want to call it, it's a blank. Now, with all these new cards, it's almost turning itself into its own variant of a resource where I'm actually sitting on blanks. This is good. I can play cards that benefit me. I can use what my opponent thought was negative in a positive aspect. What do you guys think about that?
I totally agree. I have things I want to say, but I think I'm going to save it for C3PO.
Yeah, right.
I agree that there's more things you can do with blanks. You still don't want to see a blank most times come up. I mean, these cards generally are more just mitigation dealing with a bad roll. So I don't think we've crossed any kind of threshold. It's hard, to stay without getting the full set and playing a number of games. But I see it more as, turning your bad roll into something you can use. But you're not gonna want to roll for blanks, obviously, which is really the criteria there. If you're rolling for blanks, something's wrong with the game.
I think right now it's going to be really sneaky. A lot of these cards are going to be really sneaky. Your opponents aren't going to expect them. They're going to see you roll blanks and like, oh crap, I rolled blanks, and then they do something, and then you mitigate their dice with because you can play this card now, and they weren't expecting that at all.
Yeah, and I like that a lot.
I think it's cool too because I think it pulls a really unplayed card from Awakenings into viability. So I think Nowhere to Run, the 2-cost event where you get to flip your blanks to any side.
Right.
Now that we're kind of, you can make decks where you're actually really hoping for blanks. Now that event can come into that deck and do something.
Yeah, I'm excited because that is something Destiny has been pretty good at, is creating everything as its own kind of resource and economy. The cards in your hand, the dice on the field, the cards in your graveyard, the die faces themselves. Even, a not desirable die face is becoming usable. Obviously, you don't want to roll blanks. That's not a good thing. But if you do, there are ways to get out of that bad situation, which I like about, Magic is you're never dead, even if you have a bad draw or just your mana flooded or mana logged. If you know how to play the game, you can get yourself out of bad situations, potentially win. And now we're seeing a lot of that come into Destiny, where if you just got blanked out, it's not over. It's not great. Don't get me wrong. Like, blank decks are not going to win. You want to roll all blanks and then do something crazy. But you're not just dead in the water, which is something that was kind of a problematic issue with double or quad stormtroopers. Is if you just rolled blanks, you claim the battlefield and you just hope for a better turn. Just because there wasn't really a great option if you couldn't get your dice to 2 sides you want. So now that we've got things that can help mitigate that, I'm excited because you're never in a bad position. It might be worse than what you want, but not unobtainable to get out of that. So speaking of blanks, we're going to move along to Chirrut Imwe. This is the blind warrior, and he's kind of weird, so I really want to hear about what you guys think. He's 11 health, comes in at 12 points and 16 points for elite dies. His die faces are, get this, 1 range damage, plus 2 ranged modified, 2 melee, plus 1 melee modified, a resource, and a blank. You cannot play blue abilities on this character. And after you activate this character, you may reroll all of your dice showing blanks. What the heck is this? What does he do? Like, I don't even.
I think it's a fun character that I think the game designers have some fun making him. Obviously, he's very thematic. Obviously, if you've seen the movie, the character obviously had some kind of, I don't know what they call it, the bow staff weapon that fired range and was also used as melee. So that's why he has those sides. He's also a force priest, or he wasn't somebody who used the force, but he was connected to it. So I think it's a very thematic card. I do think it's probably overcosted. It's going to be hard to find great pairings with him. 2 dice him is 16 points. So you're looking at somebody else at 14 points with 2 dice. Again, I don't know much. I don't play a ton of hero, but I do think he's thematic. I think he's fun. I'm not sure how competitive he'll be, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I really don't have an opinion of him yet. His card is just so weird. I just
I think he's waiting for a good partner.
Yes.
I threw together my pre-release deck as JLo, so Django and Kylo together, and I love them. And it's a melee deck, and it has mixed damage, and you can't do anything about that mixed damage with blocks and dodges. And I think it actually kind of works. He doesn't have a partner like Kylo does to go with him to get action economy and help him resolve those modified sides. So maybe in the future he'll see some good play, but right now I cannot think of a good pairing for him.
You can play him with Baze with 1 dice, but I don't think that's a great pairing. Obviously, Baze is all range sides. So they did that on purpose, obviously. But again, that's only a 3 dice pairing. We know that most 3 dice pairings aren't the best.
Yeah, stacking him against the 3 dice Vader Raider
right.
standard comes so short.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal. We actually are going to talk about Baze later. Chirrut is just one of those weird cards. It's hard to wrap your head around him because we've had this conversation before in other shows about, is mixed damage good? Is mixed damage bad? And there's a lot to be said about both. One is, just like Pearl was talking about, there's not a great way to control mixed damage with specific cards. We've got, blocks and dodges, but if you're running this and that, those aren't really reliable, and so you have to use things like electroshock. You've got to use very generic removal dice to just pull out the things you don't want to deal with. So it's great against removal, but then it's not great in the terms of action economy, where like, oh, you got to resolve this type of damage, and then you got to resolve that type of damage with different actions. Is he going to be more of a combo piece with which way do you think he's going to be favored, towards ranged or towards melee?
I think ranged myself.
Yeah. I would agree with ranged. At least with range, he has a solid range side. He has a +2 side, and then you can still do the 2 melee. You're not worried about, then you're only losing really the +1 melee side that probably won't get paired with anything. So I would say he's probably going to find a place with another rage character.
I'm just going to be devil's advocate here and say, melee, because the only things you can put on him for upgrades from blue are equipment, and they have, lightsabers, and those do melee damage. We just don't have a good melee melee character that isn't blue to pair with him, because I don't really like him in mono blue.
I initially thought about, hey, let's put him with, say, Luke. That doesn't really work. I thought, okay, let's put him with Padawan. That didn't work, and it was kind of like, ugh. Maybe he's a Seeds character where thematically, like, you'll stick him with Baze, but he'll turn into kind of like this Captain Phasma, where Captain Phasma's deck builds usually don't run any non-uniques, because for some odd reason she just fits really well into decks that don't use her character effect. And I feel like perhaps Chirrut will do that once we see set 3 come out, where you're going to run him in this weird deck where he doesn't fit in particularly thematically, but his die faces and his effect are very beneficial to the deck construction.
Yeah, I think if I heavily speculate, the can't play blue abilities on this character might get less worse in the future. If we start getting events that or count the number of equipments that you have, or count the number of weapons you have to do something, then it becomes a lot less bad that he's not loaded up with abilities.
Yeah, that's a fair statement. So, all right, we'll leave Chirrut for now, since he's kind of this enigma. Hopefully, we'll figure something out once the set hits, because I kind of want him to make it work. I won't lie, I love Donnie Yen in Rogue One. He was like my favorite character by far. Just the way he was written, it was so interesting to watch, because you want to know more about him and Baze, like what happened. So, we'll get to that.
It looks great. Card art looks great.
Oh yeah, and I hate his legendary equipment because, and I'm just gonna go off on a real big rant here. So his equipment, if you haven't seen it, I hate its guts, and it's the special. The special has 2 special abilities. One is it doesn't matter. The other one is remove all shields from a character and then deal it 2 damage. And I tell you, I kid you not, every time my opponents play that card, I'm like, okay, dug in on someone, and they're like, cool, roll the special, and then usually there's a Ray somewhere or a Maz. And like, resolve special, get rid of all those shields and take 2 damage. I'm like, bro, that 5-point swing is so painful. I just hate this card because I hate it so much.
When you said you hated it, I thought you were gonna trash about how bad it is. And I was like, I kind of disagree, but yeah, the card's mean.
It's 3. It's 3 costs.
Go, yeah, it's oh, God. The game. My secret ambition is to play a Qui-Gon deck, and with all this shield hate, it's just not going to happen easily. But yeah, it is nice to see kind of a dug-in hate like card, because I've seen so many people where you're about to kill them and they're like, cool, dug in? You're like, oh, crap. They have so much more health now, and Chirrut and his little handcrafted light bow just do not care about your shields. So, yeah, I want to play it, but I hate playing against it because it's just so frustrating. So, rant over. Let's move along to some more Jedis. Now this one I think we can definitely have some great discussion about, and of course C-3PO, the card I've been anxious to talk about all day. But we're going to talk about Luminara, Unduli. She is 10 health, comes in at 13 and 17 points. Her dice sides are 1 melee, 2 melee, 1 focus, 1 ranged, a special, a blank. Her special states, resolve one of your character dice, increasing its value by 2, or by 3 instead if it is a non-unique character die. Alright, let's talk about her.
She was amazing because I was able to trade her straight for a Asajj Ventress. So
That's what you like.
worked out great.
I think she's okay. I think you'll see her probably with Ray a lot, just because that's where you're going to get 4 dice out of both of those guys. I don't know if there's many other options right now for 4 dice. I think you may see her at 1 dice and at a couple of other deck combinations. Her abilities, the specials is good. So it's like Lucas said, that 13 to 17 point jump is huge. So the 4 cost difference is a lot. So I don't know many pairs you're gonna have her as elite besides with Ray.
Yeah, she definitely seems overcosted.
Right.
Yeah,
But I mean, for the 13 points for 1 die, not too bad if you could find some decent combos.
Yeah, I mean, at 13, you can run double Padawan or the Jedi Acolyte, I believe. Yeah, you could run a Jedi Acolyte and a Padawan. Not sure. Again, you're messing with 3 dice, 3 character builds. We haven't seen if that's going to be viable yet.
Right.
But that's something that she can take advantage of her ability with getting the 3 modified versus the 2.
Something I did want to bring up, and you hit it right on the head, Andrew, is Jedi Acolyte. So I'm going to go over this card real quick because I feel like it's meant to be paired with Luminara. I just don't know how. So it's got 7 health. It's 9 points. The die faces aren't super relevant. I mean, that's 1 melee, 1 focus, 2 focus, 1 discard, 1 resource. But what's really important is the effect. It says, before you resolve this die, increase its value by 1 if it is showing the same symbol as one of your other dice. So you can use that in conjunction with Luminara to get a +4 to anything on this Jedi Acolyte's dice if it's showing the same as something you've got in your pool. So you can turn that 1 damage into 5. You can turn that 1 discard into 5. You could get 7 focus. I mean, it's obviously a really difficult combo to pull off, but I mean, is that something people might build towards? Is a Luminara Jedi Acolyte build?
I don't know. It could be possible. I mean, and you also have focus on there, so I mean, you could do a 4 focus or a 5 focus. If it matches up, so you can turn anything to what you want with the Acolyte.
Yeah.
I kind of compare it to like a Leia Akbar build for red. It's kind of that similar thing where you're going to go with high quality of dice versus the number of the dice you have.
Well, that's the kind of the problem with focus, though, is you need the dice on the board after using the focus right to focus into something. And to get dice on the board, you have to have characters that have enough health to last long enough to upgrade them.
Yeah, and that's a point Lassafras is bringing up, that Jedi Acolyte is wet tissue paper.
Right, absolutely.
And let's be honest, anything under 10 is easily killed in under 2 turns. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've got two turns to live. 3 or more is very unlikely, and the fact that the Jedi Acolyte doesn't actually have any damage except that 1 side, it's really troubling because you're relying on, hey, A, your dice are still on that field, B, Luminara rolled her special, and C, your opponent doesn't remove any of those.
Also doesn't have
in the time shield. It takes. Yeah, so there's no shield creation between the Acolyte and Luminara, so he is a easy target, or you just kill Luminara and let the Jedi Acolyte sit all alone doing a whole lot of nothing. So it is... And here's a question I did want to bring up. It's not like a bad thing, but a lot of these cards we've seen coming out of Heroes, they have a lot of focus. And initially we're like, oh yeah, focus is so good, it's so good. I totally think it's good, but when 1/3 of your die faces are focused and you don't have a lot of damage, it's also not that good. So obviously FFG is creating heroes to be more focused. Great, it's thematic. How can hero players use that to get damage? Because like Obi-Wan's got 2 focus sides. Acolyte, Akbar, Mon Mothma, like how do you utilize that so you actually come out with a benefit instead of, hey, I rolled like 6 focus. Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, that's my big fear with taking out Akbar and putting in Mon Mothma is killing yourself by rolling too much focus.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to have dice out there that have damage on them, or whatever one condition you're moving toward. And I've already found myself in positions where, what does Akbar roll? He rolls 2-sided focus, and all I really needed was 1 little damage. But the card sitting next to us might fix those issues, so I'll save it.
Yep.
Here's something silly I just kind of seen. You could put, say, 2 die Luminara and 1 die Finn, and then you could bring in the 3 costs red baton. 2 melee, 2 melee, 3 melee, something like that. And you can turn that into something.
That's interesting. Huh. That might work.
Bonkers. Maybe.
So, yeah, very interesting. All right, but the card, yeah, C-3PO is going to be one of the more interesting cards in the entire set just because of how interesting he is. So let's go over the card first of all. Yeah, all the things. So he's a support droid. He is 1 resource. He is unique, so you can't have 2 out, unfortunately. His die sides are 1 focus, 1 discard, 1 resource, double blank. So he is another Commando raid target, thank goodness. And his action says, remove this die to resolve 1 of your dice, as if it were showing a different symbol. It keeps its original value. So blanks are blanks, specials are 0. We were talking about all these other cards. Hey, Mon Mothma's got that 2 focus. Cool. It's 2 anything.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about C-3PO and what he's gonna do in this game, because he is a meta defining.
He's gonna do terrible and awful things. Last night at our Spirit of Rebellion tournament, Poe Maz swept the tournament and didn't play a single upgrade for the entire tournament.
Wow.
It was C-3PO and Poe just wrecking the field.
Oh my gosh, you want to tell us what he did?
Terrible and awful things. The hit and run with Poe and getting Maz out there and resolving 2 of Maz's dice before her action is up. She can focus Poe into those special sides. And if that doesn't happen, you always got C-3PO sitting in the background, just ready to throw out another Poe special or turn Poe's, disrupt sides or whatever into just little pings of damage that it was really hard to play against. I threw a bunch of control at that deck in the final round and didn't even come close.
Did he ever play a launch bay? Because a launch bay on the field with C-3PO, your opponent's going to have a really bad time.
No, he did not, but that sounds awful. No, I just C-3PO was finding, black ones, and, just other big dice cards out of my opponent's hand, and they just took out Kylo and Jango so quickly. And I guess I did lie. He did play 1 upgrade against me, but it wasn't a dice upgrade. He used Swiftness, which has ambush and gives your next card played ambush into a fast hands. And then activated Poe, had Poe specials or Poe damage, and immediately resolved that. And then again, C-3PO is just waiting in the back there just to pick up the slop and make sure that all of Poe's dice are doing damage.
I mean, at 1 cost, with the dice sides and really just the ability, I don't know. I mean, he's gonna be in pretty much every hero red deck that can take him, because it just gives you so much versatility. There's no reason not to take him. So he's a very strong card.
Yeah, it really makes me want to make sure that I'm gonna have something on the table with my hero deck that has a special side, so that no matter what happens, I can do something with a dud die. But you really have to have that special side, which makes me, when I saw I think it's A180 blaster, I really did not like that gun. But because of C3PO out there now, I actually think I'm going to try that guy out, just because it has, the special's not bad, and you've kind of got some versatility with it, and C3PO makes it hit every single time.
Right.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of this card, and it's going to bring out the support removal. We got some new events that can deal with supports. That's going to be a thing.
Yeah, let's talk about one of those cards real quick. So this is probably going to see a lot of play to counter supports, because actually C3PO is probably not the worst support in the game. I sincerely think Imperial Inspection is going to be the worst. Because if you haven't seen Imperial Inspection, basically it's a 0-drop support that says if you roll a disrupt side, you can return a upgrade that costs up to 2 back to your opponent's hand. And there's a lot, and I mean a lot, of character dice that have disrupt. And boy, I can't tell you how many times people just get really frustrated when you drop turn 1 Imperial Inspection and they're like, holdout blaster, and they do something, and you're like, cool, roll this and get disrupt and return that holdout blaster. If you want to play it again, it essentially costs you 4 now. It's just like, oh my gosh. It's the worst thing.
Yeah,
but we're not talking about that. So.
We got a lot of just really great supports that don't eat up an action. They're reactionary. My favorite one that I saw was Dark Presence. That we kind of glazed over with a Dooku Ventress deck. And that one is, you can exhaust it after you roll something that has a discard side, and then you get to remove an opponent's dice. That's just gonna really wreck people's play, especially with you've got the Jabba possibilities of, you don't even need to keep that dice that you rolled as a discard side. You can just re-roll it again, but because you hit it one time, you get that dice removal.
Yeah, Surgical Strike I think is gonna get some play, but this card from Spirit of Rebellion is probably gonna see a lot of play. It's Sabotage. It costs 1 resource. It is neutral yellow, so heroes and villains, look out. Card is discard cards from your hand equal to the cost of a support in play to discard that support. And boy, howdy. 1 card from hand to get rid of C3PO is amazing. Right. 0 cards from hand to get rid of, Salvage Stand, that costs 0. Imperial Inspection, that costs 0. I mean, even if you're able to pop this off for a big one that might have, say you're facing a U-Wing and it's got 3 damage and you're about to die, well, hopefully somehow you have an extra card in your hand to get rid of that. But it's just really good because it's
I'm really happy that we can put in a support killer into a deck and call it viable, because I've been wanting to get rid of those darn backup muscles for 4 months now, and you can't do anything about them if you want to stay viable against other decks. But I think everybody's going to get a handy little support to throw into their deck, so you can throw in something to get them off the table.
Yeah, that is very exciting. That in Awakenings, that was probably our biggest complaint, is like, hey, these supports are really slow. These supports are really expensive. These supports are, all these things. And here we have a set that just has a ton of 0 and 1-drop supports that are very viable, very good, and offer some fantastic options. And I mean, like, yeah, C3PO, he fits into so many decks so well, and 90% of the problems we just talked about can be not fixed, but they can be mitigated to a point. Like Mon Mothma is a prime example. We talked about her earlier, and she's sitting on all these faces you may or may not need. Well, C3PO fixes that. The only problem is her numbers just aren't all that amazing. So even though you should obviously put him in the deck, where do you think he's really going to shine? Obviously, he does well with Poe. That's not even a question.
Yeah.
Who else does he slide in with, do you think?
I think somebody mentioned earlier the Rebel Commando, and I think you can get their special off for free then. So you've got, it's basically a free. He doesn't like you, remove your die, and they remove their die.
Right.
He's going to fit in with some of the heavy hitters too. I mean, if you can pair him with even an Obi-Wan, if you do blue-red Obi-Wan, you can turn that 3 melee into something else if you need it. You also have the focus. If you have too much focus on the board, you can use those for other things. There are options out there.
Yeah, I'm actually probably going to try and rebuild. Earlier when Awakenings came out, I built a like a bling bling deck, and it was Akbar and 2 hybrid guns, and you made so much money. But the problem is you couldn't capitalize it because there wasn't really anything to play. Now, the first card I thought about playing with that bling bling deck is U-Wing, because for 5 you get 3 range, 2 focus, 2 resources, double special. And if you've got C-3PO out there, that can be, hey, 3 discard, 3 disrupt, 3 money, 3 anything, or even 2. And man, you can go crazy, because when you're running Yellow Hero, you can get Millennium Falcon. You can get out your Quad Jumpers, you can get out Black One. Like, you can play a really heavy support deck with all these numbers that are pretty
So
big.
Shug, would you keep Akbar slotted in, or would you grab Mon Mothma?
That's a good question, because I would probably run Akbar because of his effect. I would be able to put a so if you run Akbar and you run 3PO and you run, say, Launch Bay, have a lot of Commando Ray targets. And so I think you would have a very viable chance of getting cards out of your opponent's hand fast, and then Akbar would trigger and you'd get 2 free damage. Mon's effect wouldn't be as useful because she doesn't have the discard side. I have an idea for a Mon Mothma build, but it's not damage, it's more of a choke. And the character that's going to be a part of that is coming up next. But it's so fun, CC3PO, and I wrote an article about this on swdestiny.com. And basically, the big thing he does is he opens up the floodgates for players to build a lot of different things. Awakenings is a great set, but it was really direct. It was very linear in the easiest terms I can make it. There's very specific decks, there's very specific builds, and there weren't great ways to filter your dice to what you needed without very specific cards. C-3PO you can put into a deck and turn things into whatever, and you can play decks in multiple fashions and keep your opponent on their toes, and I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, he's going to be dangerous. And again, like I mentioned before, a launch bay with him is just insane. Roll out, and it's 5 of anything you want.
Yeah, I'm very excited for that. I'm really excited about that. And we don't have this card on the stream today, but planetary, what is it, suppression?
The
one with the Wookiees.
Yeah.
Basically,
Uprising?
it's another 2
Planetary
drops. Oh yeah,
Uprising.
planetary uprising. That card with these red decks is really, really bonkers, because it's a 2-drop support, and basically it says whenever you claim the battlefield, your opponent deals 2 damage, spread as they please. And with these super fast aggressive decks, Poe in particular, getting that out is just really silly, because you roll out, you use Maz to resolve real fast, C-3PO is your filter into whatever you need, and then you claim the battlefield. Hopefully it's Emperor's Throne Room, so that you can flip to the Poe special, get some quick damage, and then Planetary Uprising deals 2 more damage, and you just run through your opponent's health super fast. It's really goofy.
Yeah, I'm worried to see that card get a ton of play, because my experience last night, Hero Red got really fast. I played against a Leia Akbar deck, and then the Poe Maz deck, and I had Django, and I didn't I had rarely claimed. So they're always going to get that 2 damage.
Yeah, Red Hero, if you haven't looked at the set, Red Hero is super duper fast, and I really think Red Hero is going to become a very viable not only deck but color choice, because they've got ample removal cards now. They've got the speed they need. They've got the filtering to get into whatever they need. They also have access to some really strong cards, 3, 4, and 5 drop cards that they can pay for. These supports, these characters have double resource sides. You're going to be able to drop these 3, 4, and 5 cost cards pretty effectively, and then you're going to be able to just crush your opponent with damage. It's really interesting how heroes were initially just kind of looked at, and we were like, what is a hero deck supposed to do? And with Spirit of Rebellion, it's like, oh dear God, they are coming back with a vengeance. So let's move along. Let's talk about 2 new cards. Baze Malbus. This guy is, someone we talked about earlier with Chirrut. He's got 11 health, 14 and 18 point cost for his elite and non-elite sides. His die faces are 2 range damage, 3 range damage for 1 resource, a +2 ranged modified side, 1 resource, 1 special, and a blank. And his special says deal 1 damage to each of an opponent's characters. What do we think about this guy?
Oh, he packs a punch. I think he's costed pretty appropriately. I mean, he's got 2 range damage, two range damage sides, and a 3 range damage for 1. He's going to do damage really fast. And especially once you get overkill on him, you can drop it turn 1. And I mean, you could be looking at just 6 to 9 damage with him as an elite character by himself.
Yeah,
I
just
think. Oh, go ahead, man.
I was going to say, who do you pair him with for that 12 points you have left over? I mean, Commando, I guess, somebody like that. I mean, you're getting a Chud in there. But yeah, he definitely does damage. Again, it's just that upper end. If you want to do 2 dice with him, I don't know how many options you have.
Yeah, I think he's waiting for Hero Bala to make a showing, and then he's going to be really strong, really scary.
Right.
He can go with a 1-die Leia,
Mm-hmm.
1-die Chirrut, like we were talking about before, 1-die Chewie.
Surprisingly, this is a team I constructed in my head. Double Baze, double Snap. That's it's not a nice deck. We'll talk about Snap later, but Snap is a pretty nasty control card, and with Wingman, oh boy, it gets pretty bonkers fast. But Baze, man, this guy he's kind of weird because people wrote him off real fast when he first came out. A lot of people are just kind of sitting on this card going, oh, it's the worst legendary to pull, blah blah blah. And I don't think that's the case. Like I look at him and he's got 4 damage sides. One of them is suboptimal, yes, but 50% of his die deals damage. If you stick overkill on him, oh my god, then he's just crushing you. You can put something like a holdout blaster on him. You can put a lot of guns on him, and he can get real damagey real fast. The big question is, is 11 health and his point cost, is it viable? Like, do you think he's going to be a player, or is he gonna maybe be like a tier 2 kind of deck?
You had these cards right next to each other for 5 minutes, and I didn't even think of putting them together. So good job, man. I'm kind of worried about Duggan getting weak, just because everybody's getting really fast. Are you going to claim the battlefield first? And then there's so much shield hate, and that's your major way of keeping these squishy characters alive. And 11 health and 8 health together, I don't think I've ever played a deck that was that squishy. I think we're going to need to see a little bit more of survivability cards for the red hero decks to kind of keep these 2 alive longer.
Yeah, I feel like I really want to pair him with a yellow character. That way you can get second chances, you can get armor plating going on him to keep him alive. Excuse me, second chance you can't use. But armor plating you could use.
Yeah, that's fair. You were talking earlier about a card I definitely wanted to approach. That was Force Illusion. That card is, man, it's so good at keeping people alive. do you think that's gonna change the way the game is played when you run squishy characters? Because in Awakenings we didn't have that option. You couldn't just throw a card out and be like, oh hey, instead of taking damage, I just mill myself the amount of damage that's being dealt. Now you've definitely got ways to mitigate it with armor plating, force illusion, and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on that?
And I think Force Illusion and those two cards, Force Illusion, Armor Plating, really do change the game with squishy characters. You got to get the right colors in there though, and we've already seen just like huge upsets caused by Force Illusion. 7-card discards to keep Obi-Wan in the game, and then winning games. And even better on somebody like Asajj, who, if you got her with Dooku, who do you kill? Because you've got another source of life now. Your deck is life. And boy, do you guys have armor plating? Can you send one to me? I need a couple. Because
armor plating is villain only.
That card looks so good though.
Yeah, armor plating is going to be a lot of fun to throw down. So, yeah, Baze, it's funny that both Baze and Chirrut are kind of these enigmas. They do things, but where do they do it? And I feel like we're going to see Baze kind of flesh himself out a little bit faster than Chirrut, just because his dice are a little bit more consistent towards aggressive damage, and with Red Hero being so fluid in aggressive damage, you can get him on the field with someone will figure something out. We'll be like, oh, why didn't we think about that? But he is scary. I won't lie. Like, if I were to see two of his dice on the other side of the table, the first thing in my head is Overkill is probably going to be in that opening hand, followed by probably a DH-17 or a Holdout. And let's be honest, that could easily become, without paying anything, you could see like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You could see 7 damage out of 3 dice. And that's not a joke. The other thing that actually scares me more about Baze is if you pair him with yellow. We've talked about this card a lot, and people are like, it's probably not going to happen because of how expensive it is to cast. But that's Plant Explosion or Plant Explosives. And that card is really scary because with him and Overkill, you could hit that turn 1. If you roll the 3-for-1, the 3-for-1, and the +4 on Overkill, you can just be like, turn 1, 10 damage to somebody?
Yeah,
have fun?
It's good in that case, especially because you're probably not going to be able to afford the 3-for-1s normally, so you can use the Plant Explosions to get around that.
Right. And that's something we've heard people tell horror stories of. Is like, I got turn 1 Plant Explosion. Ow. Guy was playing Baze. Oh, crap. That's not good. So, he may not be clear cut, but his numbers are high enough where he can hit 10 on turn 1. And if the dice roll out that way, there's not a lot of cards in the game or characters in the game that are going to survive that turn 1. I mean, it's pretty rough.
Yeah, he's red, so it's a trap. So if you've got this partnership up here, you've got a guaranteed 8 damage turn 1 with that baby blaster on him.
Scary.
Yeah. So I think he's very, very underestimated, but I think we'll see him in play competitively at some point. Maybe not in this set, but I think at some point he's definitely gonna get up there. But let's talk about the more interesting of these two on the table, and that is Mr. Snap Wexley, the guy who, as Jay said on the podcast, he has 3 lines in the movie.
He isn't
the guy.
He is in the books though, the Empire, the After Empire books. So as a kid.
Yeah, right. So okay, he clocks in with 8 health. Not great. He has 9 and 12 on his elite, non-elite cost, so he's cheap. He's essentially a Ray. His die faces are 1 range damage, 1 discard. I'm sorry, 1 disrupt, 2 disrupt, 1 discard. There it is. 1 special. I'm sorry, 1 resource, 1 blank. Every time I see discard, I'm like, he's got discard. It's awesome. And then his effect is, while at least one of this die is in your pool, your opponent must spend one resource in order to claim the battlefield. Is this card a good card?
I kind of like it, and the big reason is I like putting characters out there that look squishy so that they can become the primary target. Letting somebody, if you pair him with Baze, letting somebody like Baze, he's not going to take any damage. They're going to want to go after the 8 health guy. Same sort of thing with like Maz. They want to go after that really squishy, really easy target first. Then I can load up the other guy while keeping the squishy guy alive with whatever tricks I've got. And that usually can put you ahead in the mid game because now you've got this beastly character with 11 health that's just gonna be really hard to remove off the board. And we have so many ways to keep characters alive these days. So I kind of like giving up some health for stronger dice and a strong ability like Snaps.
Yeah, he's going to be interesting, especially what you're going, where you're going at it to where he's, you're putting him out there as kind of a trap. He's wimpy. You can get people to focus on him versus your other character that you really want to keep alive. Actually, just yesterday, I just played a deck on tabletop where it was 1 Snap, Elite Ray, and 1 Maz, and it was a mill deck.
Oh god!
Because he command evaded me 2 times actually. He hit mill with Ray enough times to that, and he had the action economy with Maz. It was kind of scary. We went 1-1. I was trying to test a Veers double TIE pilot deck, and he was able to control my dice to where I couldn't do damage, and he was hitting my hand. Turn 1, he hit all 5 of my cards.
Did he have C-3PO?
No, he did not. He did have it in the deck, but he didn't get it played till late, and he didn't really utilize him that well.
The first time we saw Snap, we actually looked at him and were like, hey, this is a very strong counter to the ranged aggro meta we're seeing with Balatik and Buddies, Django Veers, because they usually blow all their money on their equipment because they don't have to pay to resolve anything. And now you're looking at Snap, and he's like, hey, you still got to pay to claim the battlefield. Right. And that was one of their strengths, was pay for cheap equipment, roll their dice, resolve, and claim battlefield. Now it's like, oh, crap, I have to keep $1 just to claim the battlefield? Like, I can't play this 2-drop. I really want to play, like, Jetpack turn 1? Nope. FN or F11D? Nope. Hold up, nope.
Yeah, that's a great part about it. With Hero Red so fast, you're usually claiming first anyways, but, denying them claim if you have to, you slowly use focus to, get your stuff done or whatever you're doing. Now you can bring a much more powerful battlefield to the table. You can bring a carbon freezing chamber and, just deny access to it because you spent those resources on an upgrade. So I'm going to take away one of your dice next round.
Yeah, and the other thing is his kit actually is tooled towards that denial, because you roll out his disrupt and it's like, eat the money and leave one of his dice on the field, and now they have no money. They can't take the battlefield, so they're just gonna pass a whole lot. And it's really great that, like, he's an intuitive design, because there's a couple cards we've seen where it's like the effect and the die faces don't seem to work together. I feel like Phasma is probably my biggest hatred of that, because we've seen her placed in a lot of decks where she's got great dice, but she's not running with these non-uniques for the free Guardian. And Snap is like perfect because you've got disrupt, you've got discard, and if his dice are on the field, they're a threat to the opponent because, say, they roll a bunch of resource production. Cool, you can eat their resources, and they still have to pay $1 to claim if you've got his dice out.
He also has access to, I think, a slightly more likely scenario with, you've got the Ray Han, put the holdout blaster on Ray, roll Han. Oh, I hit the 2 disrupt, on that first round. Hit and run snap Wexley, and now you get to resolve,
Right.
some of those disrupt sides. That's going to really hurt somebody's round 1, really slow them down.
All I have to say is I hope they make a Mr. Bones and that you compare him with him. That's all I have to say.
That would be cool. Lastafras says in the chat, are you looking to run Snap as regular or elite? And if you're running him with 1 die, do you feel that he's much better than Commando or Akbar? That's actually a really good question. Are you running him for his effect, or do you actually want to run him elite so you can get some of that resource removal, onto the table? He eats your cards, he eats your resources. He's not really damage dealing. You're not gonna look at him and go, "This is the guy." Like compared to Baze. Baze is like, this guy deals damage. That's all he does. Snap does not deal hardly any damage. He just kind of screws with your economy. So would you run him at 1 or 2 dice, you think?
It's a tough decision for me because I feel like if you run him at 2 dice and you lose him turn 2, that doesn't feel pretty good to me. I feel like, well, if he's a 1 die character and you lose him in turn 2, well, that's not that big of a deal. You're going to have potentially 2 or 3 other dice that you can still work with. So I'm more of a fan of running a 1 die version of him just being an annoyance on the field.
He's going to be the main target. I mean, against in most decks, because it's 8 points, and that ability, you don't want that ability sitting being active. So if I'm playing against a Snap, I'm going to try to kill him first. So yeah, if you're playing him 2 dice, you really have to, be able to play without him, because you're going to lose him round 1 and round 2 most likely. So I'm agreeing that you're probably looking at a 1 dice Snap for most situations.
Yeah, that's fair. Pearl, have any thoughts on that?
I'm undecided. You've got my mind is completely stuck on, I want to get these cards and I want to play this set because this looks fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of the other teams I'm actually considering is 1 Snap and 2 Obi-Wan. He clocks in at 20. And Obi-Wan can guardian away the damage that could potentially kill him. Keep Snap out there. Keep that pressure on your opponent. And with C-3PO and Temin, you're really hurting the opponent because you can turn those Obi-Wan dice with big numbers into damage, or disrupting. You can keep Snap alive with his Guardian. If Obi-Wan goes down, you can do blue shenanigans. If he stays alive, you have access to C-3PO, which we saw him. You can pull out big cards like Black 1. You can do things like U-Wing. You can play your Launch Bay. And you can keep your opponent in check because you have blue removal and red resource removal on top of all of the terrible things you can do with those cards.
Yeah, that's a really good matchup, and I'd like to see that happen. Mostly because going back to Force Illusion, it's a blue ability, but it's not blue character only. So you can throw that on Snap, but now he has access to however many cards you want to discard and save him with.
Yeah, and a big combo people have been starting to figure out, and I'm so excited because when I saw Obi-Wan, I'm like, this card is not bad. People are like, Obi-Wan is bad, Obi-Wan's terrible, don't play Obi-Wan. I'm like, no, he's so good. He just needs a little bit of support. And one of the events I went to, I actually saw it, and somebody pulled Force Heal and an Obi-Wan. And Force Heal is a rare card. It costs 2 resources. It's an upgrade ability. The only thing we really want to talk about is the special. It's got 1 shield, 1 resource, 2 special, blank. And the special, it's a blue character only card, so you can't stick it on Snap, unfortunately. But the special effect is heal 1 damage from a character, or spend 1 resource to heal 2 damage from a character. And essentially what you do is you guardian away damage with Obi-Wan, and then you hopefully roll out the Force Heal. If you don't, because Obi-Wan has focus on him, you can focus Force Heal and get the healing off on him. And generally you're eating, say, 3 damage per turn, but you have enough money in this deck where you can heal off 2 of it. And so Obi-Wan becomes this giant tank. And it's really obnoxious because he's just constantly eating cards, or eating dice from your opponent, and keeping everything alive while healing himself. And then on top of that, like if he were to die, you got to be scared of that too, because he's got some really funky combo pieces he can pull out of his toolbox, and it's a perfect combination to heal him and guardian stuff away.
Yeah, and I think the rise of Guardian is gonna happen in this set. I think that damage distribution is gonna happen a lot more often, and that's why I'm really happy they gave yellow villain Relentless Pursuit. It's basically the exact opposite of Stand Aside, so you get to move damage of your opponents from one character to another for free. So you can steal some damage off of Obi-Wan that he's guardianed to get rid of that pesky snap.
Yeah, that card's going to see a lot of play, I think, especially with the fact that it ignores shields.
It does.
Yeah, so if someone's sitting on, 3 shields and 2 health, that's a kill spell, is what it is. And with so many ways for that to proc off of things like, Balatik untaps himself. Obi-Wan, he gets to activate and do combo shenanigans if you, for some reason, kill Obi-Wan. Like, it's a great little snipe card. Jay calls it sideways damage, and yellow has got a lot of access to that. And it keeps people on their toes because you can do math really well, but if you're not accounting for all of these little ways your opponent can sneak in damage, it makes the game much more interesting than just, they rolled 5, I can mitigate 4 of that, doesn't matter. Oh, but wait, here's some surprises, and I think that's good for the game, that it's not just roll and do math. Like, you have to account for a lot of other things that happen to keep your characters alive. Alright, let's take a look at our last 2 cards for the day, and boy, I'm really excited to talk about these. So first up is Aurra Singh, the Deadly Shot. She comes in at 10 HP. She has 14 and 18 as her point cost for elite, non-elite. Her die faces are 1 ranged, 2 ranged, 2 ranged, 1 disrupt, 1 resource, 1 blank. And her effect is, before you resolve this die, you may discard a card from your hand to increase its value by 1. So we could arguably say her die faces are actually 2 range, 3 range, 3 range, 2 disrupt, 2 resource. What do we think?
So sexy.
Incredible. Yeah, this is gonna see play. She is a powerhouse.
Probably better. I mean, if you compare, just off the top of my head, I think this. Well, we haven't played it yet, but Django Veers, I think, takes a backseat to Django Singh. Unless you're really getting something on those red cards. But, just the damage potential there is huge.
Yeah, she's costed appropriately. She costs 18 for elite and 14, but you could still run Balatik with her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and with them throwing in armor plating for the villain yellow to effectively give them like 2 additional shields. That pairing, doesn't clock in at the 18 that it looks like on paper. It's usually 20, and if you're really lucky to get both, 22.
Right.
And don't forget, if you run her at elite, it's both of her dice. So if you resolve the 2 dice that have 2 damage, you can pitch 2 cards and resolve 6 damage in total.
Yeah, and I think what makes it so great is she has no modifiers, and she has 3 non-modified sides. Ranged decks are usually discarding a lot so that they can find a non-modified side to resolve all those modified sides on their upgrades. You're not going to have to do that, so you are going to have those cards in hand to get rid of and do more damage.
I think she's also going to be a prime target to pair with TIE Pilot, because you can get TIE Pilot at 8 points, so you're sacrificing 4 points there, but TIE Pilot has all modified sides on it, so you can take the 50% natural damage you have from Aurra and really get use out of the TIE Pilot. And plus, of course, you have access to training to get a second TIE Pilot die, making all your ranged dice unremovable.
Right, and if you haven't seen TIE Pilot, this guy is pretty bonkers. We could talk about so many cards all day, but we have things to do, and unfortunately can't. But TIE Pilot is very, very much worth noting. So he clocks in at 7 health. He's 8 points. He's a non-unique character. His die faces are +1 range modified, +2 range modified, +3 range modified, but you have to pay 1 resource to resolve that side. 1 focus, 1 resource, a blank, and his special effect is while this TIE pilot die is in your pool, your other dice showing range damage cannot be removed by an opponent, which means if you want to remove anything that's not the TIE pilot, like if you see Aurra Sing or a gun or a support or whatever, you have to remove the TIE pilot die first. Then you can hit anything else. And like you were saying, if there's 2 TIE pilot character dice in the pool, because they protect each other, at this point, based on the way rules are written, you can't actually remove any die, because one TIE pilot protects all other ranged, and the other TIE pilot protects essentially the first TIE pilot. So no range damage die can be pulled off. And that's... is that gross? Is that fair? I mean, like, what do you guys... Let's talk about this for a
That'd
second.
probably be explained.
Yeah, I mean, it turns off dodges, it turns off deflects, it turns off a lot of removal cards that we've seen. It's going to turn a lot of stuff off, and you know your opponent's going to have a 25 card deck versus a 30 card deck. You know, essentially, there's cards are just going to be used for rerolls.
Yeah, and that's what it protects you from too. Is now you've got time to fix your dice, and your opponent can't do anything about it. You know, you get to leave your other ranged up there, and they're safe.
Yeah, I feel like we're gonna have to talk about TIE Pilot in another show, just because that card is it changes the game. Because like if you've ever played Magic, there's a bunch of like Magic cards where it's like as long as this card is out on the field, you have to attack this card, and then you put an equipment on it that's like this card never takes any damage and cannot be destroyed, and then you play another card saying the card that you equip to the creature can't be destroyed. And so you're just looking at this giant beatstick that you have to attack, you can't kill, you can't deal damage to, and you're just kind of like, like what do I do? And TIE Pilot is not too different from that.
Right, and with Aurra, you can get just massive amounts of damage just with the character dice alone. So you can use their upgrade slots for other things potentially, like fast hands, armor plating, stuff that doesn't give you dice, but just supports them because they already have good dice already. You want to use them.
Yeah, and there's a big support I really want to bring to the table for Aurra decks, and that is improvisation. The 0-cost support, it's neutral yellow. It has ambush, so when you play it, it costs nothing, you get a free action out of it, and the action on the support is remove one of your dice showing a blank to reroll any number of your dice. So Aurra is going to be pitching cards to boost her damage, and with this on the field, if you happen to roll out blanks, you can turn those into free rerolls. And the best part about improvisation is it's an always on action. You don't exhaust the support to do it. So if you roll blanks, if you have a bunch of blanks and you reroll it and you hit a bunch of blanks again, you can keep those cards in your hand. You are eating your dice, but you're still able to pay the cost for Aurra to deal gratuitous amounts of damage. And you're able to get away from Asajj Ventress forcing you to pay 2 cards to reroll. Now you're sitting on cards in your hand, you still have the ability to reroll, and I think it's a really strong combination with these decks.
Agreed.
She's good.
All right, so yeah, I'm pretty sure we're gonna see Aurra in something or another coming up. She may not be this top tier, but man, her like Pearl was saying, when you look at the card, you have to account for the entire set of cards in both pools from Awakenings and Spirit of Rebellion, because she's not 10 health if you're running 2 armored plating. She essentially is 14 health if you can get your hands on those. And so you also have,
ammo belt.
Yeah, you've got ammo belt. You've got a lot of ways. If you run her with blue, you've got Force Illusion. So it's never just, 10 health, I can kill her with a planned explosive. Like, you could if she has no shields on. Absolutely correct. But if you deal damage over a period of time in the game, that is not a 10 health character. That can be in upwards of 14 to even 16 to 18 if you're running both armored plating and force illusion. Like it's a pretty big number, and that's something that actually excites me about Vader is he also gets way bigger too. And he's hard enough to kill with 13, so imagine putting force illusion on him and you're just like, hey, he's at 15, he's at 16. Just it increases the health of the game because now you can play a little bit longer. I don't like games where it's over in 2 rounds because you just got a really good die roll. I didn't have any way to resolve it or remove it, and the game's over because you just rolled like 20 damage in 2 turns. The fact that you can mitigate that, I think, is good for both the game and for the players because you actually get to play the game. You have a chance. So, all right, let's look at our last character. I also talked about this guy on my article on swdestiny.com, and I think this guy is fun. I also think he's very valuable in decks, but we'll talk about him. So FN 2199, he comes in at 11 health, 10 points and 13 points. Very low cost for a very high health character. And his die faces are 1 range damage, 1 melee damage, 2 melee damage for 1 resource, 1 shield, 1 resource, a blank. And his effect is, after you play a weapon on this character, roll that weapon die. If able, you may immediately resolve it. What do you guys think?
Traitor.
I really like him. Spirit of Rebellion, put the foot on the gas pedal and just really sped everything up, right? So getting a character out there like this across from your opponent kind of keeps you in the game with his ability to get upgrades on, resolve them before they can do anything. And I haven't done it yet. I really want to pair him with Django.
Yep.
And just have that nasty mixed damage deck that you don't really care that it's slow because you've got the Django action economy, you've got FN getting a little bit of extra turn in there. So I really like it.
I think you're great with Django. I'm excited to see any builds with that. And it's definitely the mixed damage is interesting, and this is how I think they're going to do mixed damage with a character like this with a great ability and a lot of HP. So I think we'll see a lot of play for this card.
Yeah, Lassie in the Twitch chat is saying that he makes bad weapons good.
Right.
Like the infantry grenades, it makes it good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's a real grenade. It goes off when you throw it. It doesn't wait.
Right.
Yeah, but it can go the yellow way too. I've seen it played where you play like a 20 upgrade deck with him, and you just chain off weapons one after another. But a lot of those weapons do have a lot of blanks, so you can roll out and be blanked and be like, yeah, that just got nothing for that. I kind of want to pair him with blue. That way, kind of like with Grievous, he's got melee, so you want to pair him with blue so you can put a lightsaber on him or something.
Yeah, that's good. That's good pairing.
Well, the yellow pairing, it has flamethrowers, which, rolling out for free and getting that 4 damage side, if you can pay for it, that's sneaky and it really hurts.
Oh, yes, you're right.
And thermodets too.
And vibro knucklers as well.
Yep.
I think I like yellow better now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, who likes lightsabers?
Yeah, well, there is Kylo's lightsaber. That is still a very scary card.
Blue
but
character
actually,
only.
I agree. Well, there's ways to cheat. Cargo hold cost. But, I agree with yellow, and the reason is Unkar.
Yeah.
The big thing about FN 2199 is you can have this 20 weapon deck, and I was like, oh my gosh, it looks so good. And then I did math, and I'm like, well, there is potential you can hit modified sides. There is potential you can hit like disrupts or discard. You can hit numbers you don't actually want. So then it's like you can't immediately resolve it. But what if you just roll out, like, say for example, for sake of discussion, you have 3 shields on everybody, and you roll out a shield. Okay, now you're stuck. So how can you use those die faces you're getting your advantage? And I was like, what about Unkar? You can run 2 Unkars, you can run 2 FNs, you get 4 dice, You are unfortunately a little bit on the low spectrum because you're looking at, I believe, 27 points. I mean, 3 points, whatever. But you can use those dice you don't need. You can eat them for Unkar and get cards out of your hand and make money. And that will allow you to play more cards onto FN. Obviously, you're going to try and play an expensive card and overwrite at the same cost, so you're not paying any money. But another thing you can do is, when making money, needing cards out of your opponent's hand, keeping their resources low, you're keeping their economy low, and you can pay for big things like, an ATST. You can keep pressure on your opponent because the FN decks are not going to be fast. You're going to be playing every action where it's like, turn 1, 2-drop, overwrite, next action, 2-drop, overwrite again, overwrite again. You're going to try and roll these weapons out and do as much damage as possible, while your opponent's probably going to just blaze through and claim the battlefield. So it's an interesting thing. You're probably going to want to take Mos Eisley so you can bounce. If you for some reason go fast enough where you claim the battlefield before they do, you can bounce one of those equipments back to your hand and keep the loop running with FN as you try and crush them out.
How would cargo hold work with him? Like, could you transfer a weapon onto him with the battlefield? And does that count as playing it on him? So then you could, again, roll that die out, and if it hits something, you can resolve it all in that battlefield claim ability?
No, it's a move. It
Okay.
specifically says move. So play is coming from hand to field. Moving is from something that's already on the field to another thing that's on the field. Kind of like backup muscle. Like, you move damage from backup muscle to a creature or a character, which is why Count Dooku cannot respond to that with his effect, because you're not dealing him damage, you are moving damage to him. Which is another thing that we probably should mention about that card Pearl brought up that deals 2 damage. It actually, I believe it says move 2 damage from Relentless Pursuit.
Ooh,
yeah. So, Relentless Pursuit says moved up to 2 damage from an opponent's character. So you can't respond to that with Dooku either. So you can snipe him out with 2 damage that he basically can't block.
Again, apply all the shield hate.
Yeah, right. So is FN something you think is viable for tournaments? Because all these decks we've talked about are real fast, real hard hitting. He does rely on a lot of luck, but he turns everything in your hand into something playable.
I think he can be useful once he's exhausted, once you're already rolled out, then you overwrite to maybe get like that natural damage you need to resolve some of the other modifier dice. I think that's where he can be really useful.
And despite his ability, he's a decent die with a great amount of health for his points. So I think you'll see him a lot of decks.
I wrote Poe's ability off a couple months ago before people really learned how to play him, and now he's a powerhouse, and I see FN having the same capabilities.
All right, very interesting. Great. So that's pretty much the end of the show. Is there anything you guys, other cards you want to talk about before we wrap this up and get out of here?
I don't believe so.
Nope.
Mind if I plug the tournament?
Yes, please do.
All right, so Artificery, and that's artificery.com. We're running a tabletop simulator tournament this Saturday, April 15th, and signups are on our website right now. And it's at 10 a.m.
Awesome. So definitely go check that out. And if you're watching us for the first time, we are the Knights of Ren. We have a podcast we tape every weekend. We're going to be recording tomorrow. So, there's technical. What's going on, man? So, Star Wars Celebration. So, there's a bunch of stuff to talk about. So, we're the Knights of Ren. We're going to be covering Star Wars Celebration next week. We're going to be going to Worlds in, 3 weeks? Chris is our liaison, and he's actually setting up a big, how would you explain it? It's just like a hangout, happy hour.
Yeah, happy hour gathering, just chill. You don't have to drink. It's at a bar, but we'll have food and get to meet up and talk about Star Wars Destiny Friday night of Worlds.
Yeah, so if you're heading out to Worlds, all 3 of the Knights of Ren are going to be there. Chris is going to be there. We've got potentially some special guests we've asked if they are interested in coming, so we're waiting for their response. But worst comes to worst, Friday night, grab a drink, grab some food, just kind of rest, hang out. We have some special stuff we're going to be giving out at that event as well. So otherwise, big thanks to everyone. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Early Eddie. We really appreciate having you guys on. These are our Patreons, and boy howdy, I have to say a big thank you to our Patreons. If it wasn't for your assistance, we actually would not be able to have made it to Worlds, and so we just cannot thank you enough. That we're going to be working our butts off to cover the event with video, audio, pictures. We've got interviews out the wazoo scheduled. We are talking to pretty much anyone who's affiliated with Destiny, and we're so excited. So thank you very much, guys, for your support. And with that being said, we will see you in a couple days with our podcast. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.